Governance. Okay, it's a word we hear thrown around all the time, right? In the news, in politics, in business meetings. And let's be honest, it sounds a little formal, kind of distant, maybe even boring. But it's actually the invisible architecture that shapes our daily lives, from the roads we drive on to the rights we all enjoy. So let's dive in and figure out what this thing really is. I want to start with this quote from Rohini Nailakani because it just gets right to the heart of it. This idea completely reframes the whole topic. It shifts governance from something that's just done to us to something we actively have to help create. Exactly. It feels like this big, abstract, complicated concept. So, in this explainer, we're going to strip all of that away. We're going to make governance concrete, understandable, and show you why it's one of the most important ideas in our world today. All right, first things first. To really get a handle on this, we need to pin down what governance actually means. Let's take it from this vague, cloudy idea to a solid anchor we can all grab onto. The word itself gives us a massive clue. It comes from the ancient Greek keber hernoin, which means to steer. And I really want you to hold on to that image of steering a ship. That is the perfect way to think about this. Governance isn't about raw command and control. It's about the art of guiding a society through complex, constantly changing waters. And this brings us to a super common point of confusion. We often use the words government and governance like they're the same thing, but they're fundamentally different. The government, that's the actor, the institution, the organization. But governance, that's the entire process. You can see the difference right here, the rigid top-down structure versus this interconnected web. It's a huge shift from control to cooperation. The government is a key piece of governance, for sure, but it is not the whole story. Okay, so if governance is all about steering the ship, who exactly is at the helm? And what are the rules of the sea they have to follow? Let's meet the crew. So this chart makes it super clear it's definitely not just one captain steering this thing. Of course, the state is a massive piece of the puzzle, taking up that big slice of the pie. But look who else is on board. You've got the private sector, businesses large and small. You have civil society like nonprofits and community groups. And crucially, you have individual citizens, you and me. Real governance happens in the space between all of these groups and how they collaborate, debate, and sometimes even how they conflict. Now, these actors don't just do whatever they want. They're guided by a set of core principles. Think of them as the rules of the game. For instance, the rule of law just means that everyone, from a president to an ordinary citizen, has to follow the same set of laws. No exceptions. Transparency means we get to see how decisions are being made, not just the final result. These aren't just buzzwords, they're the bedrock elements that build trust in the entire system. So we have our actors and we have our rules. But how does it all actually come together in the real world? Well, it turns out there are very different ways to steer the ship, and they can lead to vastly different journeys. This table lays out the pretty stark contrast between two of the most fundamental approaches. In a democratic model, power flows from the citizens up. Accountability is absolutely everything. But in an authoritarian model, that whole flow is reversed. Just look at that row for citizen role. It's the difference between being an active participant and having little to no say at all. It fundamentally changes who the system is designed to serve. But, regardless of the specific model a country uses, there's a kind of destination that most societies are striving for, a North Star. And that's what we call good governance. And this part is so important. Good governance isn't just about having the fastest trains or the most efficient paperwork. It's a system built on values. It's about asking the big questions. Does the system protect basic human rights? Does it actively fight corruption? Does it uphold the rule of law for everybody, not just for a select few? This is the ideal we measure all systems against. And this quest, this journey, it's not new. Not at all. It's a story that has been unfolding for centuries. You can trace it all the way back to the Magna Carta in 1215, which was one of the first times anyone put limits on a king's absolute power. It builds through huge ideas like the separation of powers. And this journey takes us right up to 1989, when the World Bank talked about a global crisis of governance, which is what really pushed this term into the mainstream conversation we're all having today. So, if good governance is our destination, how do we check our coordinates? How do we know if we're on course? Well, we need instruments. And that's exactly what these 6 indicators from the World Bank are. They turn that big, abstract ideal into a set of tangible questions we can actually measure. Instead of just asking, is the government good, we ask specific things like, can citizens actually hold their leaders accountable? Is corruption being actively controlled? This is how we move from philosophy to a real, practical assessment. Which brings us to our final section. Where is this ship headed now? How is the very act of steering society evolving to navigate a much more complex and rapidly changing world? First up, the digital wave. E-governance has moved way beyond just having a government website. I'm talking about being able to renew your driver's license from your phone, or using an app to report a pothole directly to your city's public works department. It's all about using technology to fundamentally change the relationship between us and the state, making it more direct, more instant, and more responsive. And then there's the real game changer, artificial intelligence. This isn't science fiction anymore. We're already seeing AI being used to optimize city traffic grids in real time or to analyze data to predict where healthcare resources will be needed most during flu season. The potential here is to make governance radically more efficient and proactive. Though, of course, it also raises huge new questions about things like data privacy and algorithmic bias that we have to navigate very, very carefully. And finally, one of the biggest shifts happening is sustainability. For a long time, the environment was seen as this separate, siloed issue. But now, massive challenges like climate change are forcing a total rethink. It's no longer enough for a policy to just be economically sound. It also has to be environmentally sustainable. This principle is being woven into the very fabric of how we make decisions for our future. And all of these future trends really point towards the powerful idea in this quote. The future isn't about more rules, more bureaucracy, more governance. It's about better governance. The goal is to be smarter, more effective, and more responsive, focusing on the quality of the rules, not just the quantity. Which brings us right back to where we started. Governance is not a spectator sport. As our technology gets more powerful and our global challenges get bigger, the need for smart, effective, and fair systems has never, ever been greater. So the final question isn't just for governments or big institutions, it's for all of us. How will you be a co-creator of good governance?